Well, look, the first movie came out in '97, and literally since then,
Mine
we
will
did
be
3 years
dark
of HBO.
R
that, I
supernatural
produced,
thriller.
and that
So
was sort of
again,
R-rated. But
not
people
a
have been asking us
superhero
some questions.
movie
When's the next one
that's
coming?
R.
Now,
I'm just saying I want to go in another
couple
decade.
decades.
And given that every other corner by
I got
dwarf,
distracted with my
I think this one more serious
R-rated comic book movie made $1 billion. So I know for years it was more comic book, which I was every month.
When Todd McFarlane created Spawn, he had a plan that went beyond keeping the character constrained to the panels on a comic book page. The comic book would act as a foundation of what he calls the 4 pillars of a successful property, those being toys, a video game, animation, and a movie. It's well known that Todd wasted no time getting into the toy business, launching his company McFarlane Toys that went on to become a beast that redefined the toys industry. In October of '95, the first Spawn video game hit store shelves for the Super Nintendo. Spawn the animated show hit the tube in May of '97. Finally, the infamous Spawn movie would rise from hell and hit the big screen in the summer of '97. But before Spawn made it to Hollywood and blessed our eyes with his beautiful render of Malebolgia, Todd had a number of meetings with different production companies to bring his creation to life. Reluctant to hand off his baby to one of the major studios like Columbia Pictures or Universal, in fear of having no creative input, and more importantly, losing merchandising rights to toys spun off from the movie, McFarlane landed on New Line Studios after meeting with president of production, Michael DeLuca, who was an avid comic book reader and well aware of Spawn. There, he entrusted his creation in the hands of Mark DePay and Alan McElroy. DePay, known for his visual effects on the T-1000 for Terminator 2 and the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park, made his directorial debut with Spawn. McFarlane also had a hand in casting the titular hero. He went for a fairly unknown actor at the time, Michael Jai White, who, in my opinion, does an excellent job playing Spawn, and so does John Leguizamo as Clown. Given DePay's experience with computer effects, his involvement in this movie may have been seen as a logical decision. After all, bringing characters like the Violator to life and realizing fantastical elements such as Hell and Spawn's K7 Letha symbiote suit would require some state-of-the-art VFX to make these things believable. You're gonna want to sit down for this one. Spawn is not a good movie. It managed to gross $87.9 million worldwide, which was about twice its production budget, snuffing out the possibility for a sequel. To amalgamate much of critics' reviews at the time, Spawn was a film mostly concerned with putting its visual effects in the forefront, but even that aspect holds little value. Although the practical stuff is pretty good, the artist did an excellent job adapting Spawn's look, giving it a more organic feel, as well as Clown's Violator form. Not all the CGI for him looks terrible, and again, the practical puppet they use for the close-up shots hold up pretty well. From a narrative standpoint, the movie makes your eyes glaze over with its nonsensical plot and repetitive action sequences. Fart jokes, expository dialogue, and Martin Sheen doing his best bad guy voice guaranteed this movie's fate of becoming one of the worst comic book movies of all time.
Soon the whole world will be at my command. Anyone who refuses to join my consortium won't be around to argue.
Blame it on the inexperienced director or blame it on the restraints of a PG-13 rating. Maybe Spawn was just made at the wrong time. This was the 90s, well before the superhero formula was on lock, and kind of a low point for superhero movies. That same year, we got Batman and Robin and Shaq's Steel. Now, superhero movies are completely on the other side of the spectrum, dominating the box office every few months and perhaps keeping the movie theater going experience alive. With that in mind, fans have been clamoring for a Spawn reboot. You have, right? It's not just me. As early as 2005, Todd McFarlane has been insisting that the plan to bring Spawn back to the movies has been on track. Every year it seems that we get another headline of Todd saying the same old thing during a New York or San Diego Comic-Con, not really giving much reassurance. While we've gotten some worthy news like the casting of Jamie Foxx as Spawn and Jeremy Renner as Twitch Williams, as well as the backing of Blumhouse Productions, the likelihood of this movie ever coming to fruition seems to get lower every year. But I'm tired of waiting. I'm willing to reach down to the depths of hell and pull this damn movie out. We have here a draft of a Todd McFarlane written Spawn script from 2017, and I'm gonna find out why this movie refuses to get made. Over the years, Todd McFarlane has been pitching a very different approach for this new Spawn movie. Where the last one was loud, obnoxious, and over the top with its visual effects, the reboot would be more grounded and lean more into thriller and horror elements. Spawn would be less of a superhero and more of a looming entity, a boogeyman in the shadows whose appearances would be sparse. Drawing comparisons to the 1975 classic Jaws, Todd had this to say about this depiction of Spawn.
One of the drafts we did, their complaint was, well, Spawn doesn't speak. Yeah? Well, how can that be? Because it's called Spawn. Let's go back to my argument with Jaws. Last time I checked, that guy didn't have too many speaking parts either. If you set up the system where you know the damage the shark can cause, and you have a sound cue, then you know that if something happens, that means Spawn's coming. And Spawn coming means you're in shit. Fuck, you better run. Spawn coming, that's like a tornado.
Todd describing Spawn as a tornado coming your way is amusing, because when Spawn is not shapeshifting into beds or cockroaches, in the script, multiple times he's depicted as strong gusts of wind blowing through alleyways, making debris fly everywhere, obscuring the character's vision and thus the audience's. This is where Blumhouse Productions, coming in as the company to produce this movie, starts to make sense. Blumhouse is known for producing low-budget, high-concept horror and thriller movies. Their first low-budget hit was Paranormal Activity, made on a mere $15,000 and grossing $193 million worldwide. They'd go on to produce hits like Get Out, Split, and The Invisible Man, which is probably one of the more effects-heavy movies. But you can see the common through line between these movies. They put their characters in the forefront, focusing on them over big fancy monster designs that require a lot of VFX work, like we see in movies such as 2017's It, whose budget was around $40 million. Compare that to The Invisible Man's $7 million. So limiting Spawn to being a dark figure would help keep the movie within that low-budget sweet spot Blumhouse likes to hang out in. No need for big fancy shots of his flowing red cape, or whatever this was. What doesn't make sense for me is why cast such a big star like Jamie Foxx if Spawn is gonna be mostly regulated to a non-speaking, obscured figure in the shadows. There are a few scenes where Spawn takes the form of Al Simmons, but judging by this script, I can't imagine it would be more than 10 minutes of screen time for Jamie Foxx. At that point, I'd rather have Keith David be brought back, completely committing to having Spawn be this supernatural force divorced of any sense of humanity, and give us a cool ass voice to make up for the lack of visible Spawn presence. Because this movie is not at all interested in the backstory of Al Simmons, his background as a government agent, or his deal with Malboja. Instead, this movie's leading man is Jeremy Renner as Detective Twitch Williams. Going back to the Jaws comparison, Todd had this to say about the movie's protagonist.
The thought is that the movie was called Jaws, and the movie was about Jaws, but I don't say that we'd say the star of the movie was the shark per se. What made the movie interesting was the sheriff, and the biologist, and the boatman chasing after the monster. For me, again, it's the villagers trying to hunt down Frankenstein, and the mad scientist seeing if he can create something. All of that is why you care about the monster when he's created. To me, that's the mindset of the new Spawn. To me, the true star of the movie is going to be the way I have it now, is this character called Twitch.
If you take a quick glance at Twitch from the comics, you'll see that he bears zero resemblance to Jeremy Renner. It seems that Todd wants to reimagine the character to fit the leading man role in a more conventional way. A handsome everyman that can easily switch to action hero mode at the shot of a gun. I think it would have been more compelling to cast someone who has the frail older look of Twitch from the comics. This unlikely hero amidst corrupt figures and supernatural occurrences, as a way to make him stick out from the Jake Gyllenhaals and James McAvoys of Hollywood. Twitch Williams and Sam Burke are two NYPD detectives and prominent characters in the comics. You'll see them investigating gruesome crime scenes, often linked to Spawn in some way, throwing the two detectives into some supernatural mishap that is way bigger than the both of them. Their prominence eventually led to their own spin-off series, simply titled Sam and Twitch, a dark and grittier book that focuses on different case files with the supernatural stuff taking a backseat. Sam and Twitch have also appeared in video games, the animated show, and they have a blink and you'll miss it cameo in the '97 movie. This script completely ditches Sam. I guess Todd thought the silly fat man would feel out of place in this movie. The movie introduces Twitch with an action sequence where he and a squad of police officers raid a house in pursuit of a criminal named Billy. Oh god, no, not Billy Kincaid. The script doesn't actually specify if this is meant to be the infamous child killer from the comics, but I like to imagine that it is an Easter egg for the hardcore fans. The confrontation between Twitch and Billy escalates to a foot chase through the neighborhood, putting innocent families in danger. Billy manages to steal a car and screeches away from the scene. Before Billy safely escapes, Twitch takes aim and is able to land a kill shot on Billy through the rear window of the car. You ever notice how Jeremy Renner is always playing a skilled marksman? Shortly after, we're introduced to Twitch's wife and daughter, Kate and Lauren, a dedicated husband and loving father. We can see where this is going. It's the classic case of a husband deeply committed to his job in the force that it affects his relationship with his wife, constantly having her worried that her husband might not make it home one night. The plot of the movie is set into motion after a sting goes wrong. Twitch and his partner Danny are keeping tabs on a thug that works for a gang related to a case Twitch has been committed to for some time. The thug is suspiciously spooked into running away by a police officer that wasn't expected to be at the scene. The officer gives chase to the thug as Twitch and Danny also spring into action. We start to get interspliced shots of Twitch's daughter Lauren getting ready to finish her day at school. There's a sense of impending doom as we cut between the foot chase and the innocent girl. The chase eventually leads into a dark alley where the suspicious police officer loses the thug and things wind down. But then a dark presence seeps in. Roaches skitter over the floor, ravens fly through the alley, and the wind roars. This is our second encounter with Spawn. The script describes this encounter in a way that you can picture this scene playing out with a lot of close-up shots of the victim with reactions of the spooky figure being implied here. A lot of shaky cam with newspapers and trash flying everywhere. A lot of the legwork is being done with the sound effects. I think this works. Keeping the monster obscured in the early scenes is an effective way to ramp up tension and keep the mystery intriguing. One of my favorite Hulk moments from the movies is the early stuff from The Incredible Hulk, where the Green Goliath is kept in the shadows as the soldiers chase him through the warehouse. After the horrific scene with Spawn and the officer, we cut back to Lauren as she waits for her father outside her school looking small and fragile. Twitch was supposed to pick her up from school that day, but was distracted by the current incident. A truck blocks our view of the child, and when it passes, she's no longer there. This is the main driving force of the narrative. Twitch is thrown into a deep depression after the death of his daughter. He and his wife divorce, and he's left a broken man with a sole purpose: to track down whoever is responsible for the death of Lauren. When asked about how the comics would affect the direction of a new Spawn movie, Todd had this to say.
I try to react to each medium as being its own thing. When I'm sitting down talking to the comic book people, all we're talking about is what would be the coolest comic book we can pull off, and what would strike a chord in the people we think are reading Spawn, or people reading comic books as a whole. How do we get them interested? And that may not be driven by what would make a good movie per se, or what would look good on a screen movie and animation. It's a comic book. It's words and pictures, and you've got a different set of rules you have to live with. You can deal with the different rules of each medium, and don't let any tail wag any dog.
The sentiment holds true in this draft of the script. Todd isn't pulling from a particular comic book arc to serve as inspiration, as Marvel and DC movies often do. When Spawn was relatively fresh at the time of the '97 movie and animated show, there was a bit of overlap, since they were treated as a way to tell his origin story to new audiences. The story that this script tells is a new direction for the property. The mainline comics normally put Spawn on a grander scale, having the character at the forefront in all his supernatural glory, with explosive action, monsters, and sci-fi elements here and there. Don't expect Overkill, Redeemer, or even Clown here. The spin-off series Sam and Twitch could arguably serve as inspiration for this movie, but without Twitch's partner Sam being present in the script, it's tough to draw significant parallels between this movie and those books. The movie follows Twitch as he goes off the deep end, becoming enraged and breaking police protocols as he becomes obsessed with his vengeful quest. Spawn comics have told stories dealing with corruption and political themes, albeit in a schlocky manner, and this movie would lean heavily into that angle. Most of the supporting characters are made up of cops, gang members, and the neighbors that live in Twitch's new apartment building in the Bronx. You get a bit of Seven, a bit of Training Day if I'm being generous, and very little of A Nightmare on Elm Street, the 2010 reboot sadly. This is most definitely a cop drama, if that's an actual genre, with a mystery that's very predictable. I mean, what other choice would you have other than to make the police officers Twitch works with be involved with the death of his daughter? It's obvious from the second it happens. Sprinkled throughout are supernatural occurrences involving Spawn killing abusers, corrupt cops, and criminals. Each kill tries to do something unique with the way Spawn uses his powers to shapeshift into all sorts of things. I think it's cool treating Spawn as this ambiguous force of brutal justice, although one of these sequences has no subtlety. There's one where this big guy is covered in tattoos, and as the lights flicker, his tattoos start to move around and change into letters of the alphabet. Eventually they spell out, "I hate women," across his chest, and then Spawn kills him with his chains. Kind of on the nose there. Like I mentioned before, there are a few scenes where Spawn takes the human form of Al Simmons. He's sure of his place in this world as a Hellspawn. He's a mysterious, wise figure on this war against evildoers. His interactions with Twitch are kind of abstract, at least from Twitch's point of view. But what doesn't work for me is that Spawn's inclusion feels tacked on. The only reason he's here is because the movie is called Spawn, and we need some scenes with visual effects to justify this movie being called Spawn. He's not a pivotal element of the core plot, he just happens to be here. I wish some of the characters were swapped with ones from the comics that are linked to Al Simmons' death, to give him more of a personal stake in the story, and that make him a vengeful spirit. But I don't know, maybe these gruesome kills would look cool enough to make me happy that he's at least here. We'd get our best look at Spawn during the film's climax that takes place in Twitch's apartment building. Twitch finds out that his partner Danny was in on a plan to distract him from the case he's been working on. In hopes to have him drop the case, they had to do something extreme. The distraction was a kidnapping of his daughter, but it went horribly wrong when she became sick and died. It is set up earlier in the movie that Lauren is an asthmatic. It is also revealed to Twitch that Maria, a neighbor he became acquainted with, is being held captive in his apartment complex. So he races over, and this is where we get the big climactic battle between police officers, gang members, and our two heroes Spawn and Twitch. This is the most special effects heavy sequence of the movie, as we get our best look at Spawn and some glorious kills. One sequence describes Al Simmons being covered in black oil as it runs down his entire body, his blood-red cape flowing like water, as thugs pepper him with bullets, but they have no effect on him. This is without a doubt the money shot of the movie. I gotta shout out Todd for sticking true to his vision of Spawn and having him shapeshift into creatures like ravens, wolves, and cockroaches. Because, as we all know, those kinds of animals are made up of the evil entity that gives Spawn his powers. Once everyone involved in the whole Lauren fiasco is killed off, Twitch witnesses Spawn revert back to his human form. Before Al walks off, they give each other a bro nod, forming this unspoken partnership to take on this war of evil. The movie ends with a shot overlooking the city and Spawn's face jumping at the camera like a shark on the attack. So, Jaws, remember? The Spawn reboot being stuck in limbo can be attributed to several things. Todd McFarlane has been adamant about making this reboot R-rated. In the early and mid-2000s, R-rated superhero movies weren't something that studios were quick to greenlight. But modern successes like Deadpool and The Joker, which is the first R-rated movie to gross over $1 billion, have made studios a lot more open to R-rated superhero movies. But the biggest hurdle the development of this movie has faced could be the involvement of the Todd father himself. Todd has been insisting that not only does he want to write the screenplay, but he also wants to direct the movie despite not having any prior experience. I can't imagine many studios having much confidence in someone who's never directed a film before, despite this movie trying to stick with a low-budget model. Especially when it involves a character that has a notorious background when it comes to movies. If this film doesn't get it right, Spawn may never have another chance to be adapted to the big screen. And while the MCU has stuck to a formula that's proven to keep audiences coming back for more, we've also seen the Morbiuses, Hellboys, and New Mutants of the world. I can see the Spawn movie very easily falling into that category of comic book movies. Not to mention that Todd McFarlane often spreads himself too thin. At this point, he's a businessman more than anything, upkeeping his company and making deals with all sorts of different people. He's got toys to make, covers to ink, and baseballs to buy. Can this man focus on the production of a movie long enough to make it coherent? Todd has recently been teasing bringing the property to a streaming service, the hottest trend of the 2020s. But again, this all seems kinda murky and more like wishful thinking. Much like how it all started, it seems to me that Spawn is gonna have to make some sort of pact with the devil to pull this movie out of development hell. You didn't really think I was gonna end the video that way, did you? Although, I'm not gonna lie, if I had dedicated to the Simple Plan ending, I think it could have gone pretty hard. That is the band that sings that song, right? Simple Plan? Nah, I'm kidding, I know it's Tuba Stank. Anyway guys, thanks for watching the video. I've been wanting to talk about the Spawn movie reboot for a while now. I think it's a fascinating beast. Whether or not this movie is ever gonna come out, who's to say? At the time of this video's recording, we're about a week away from New York City Comic Con, and Todd said he has some big news to drop during the convention, so we'll have to wait and see if it's anything of note. But this marks the ending of 2022's Spawntember. But before we close out, I do want to feature some Spawn tent that you guys out there shared with me, and I think it's awesome. I love when you guys get involved in the Spawntember festivities. So first up is some Spawn fan art by Nightline Art. You can follow him on Twitter there, super badass. We have here a crossover of Evil Dead and Spawn by Luke Marone. This actually spawned during the Spawntember stream. While I was playing Spawn Armageddon, I sort of pitched this quick idea of a crossover between Evil Dead and Spawn and how that could be potentially awesome. And Luke Marone brought it to life. So cool stuff, dude. And finally, we have a video by Batman Ultra 7. Spawn, the image of indie comics. This is a video on the creation of Spawn and what Image Comics means for the comic industry. You know, all the stuff you love to hear about Todd McFarlane and his crazy idea back in the early 90s. But anyway, guys, that's the end of Spawntember for 2022. I'll be back next year with Spawntember once again, where we're keeping the show rolling as far as I can. So, until next time, thanks for watching.